Hey guys, this is Matt with 2 Feet Outdoors YouTube channel. Today I'm in City Island, New York, and we're headed back to Hart Island. It only took 3 tries, but I finally got in the lottery for the South Island tour. It'll be an awesome tour led by the New York City Urban Park Rangers.
Welcome to the Hart Island tour, the Hart Island South tour specifically. My name is Ranger Hunter. I'm going to be one of the rangers leading the program today, and I'm joined
by Ranger Nick. It's nice to meet all of you.
Yeah. And we're also going to be assisted by Ranger Brian, who's all the way over there, and Ranger Julie, who I also think is all the way over there. So they'll show up in a moment. Has anybody here done the Hart Island North tour before? Yeah, we have a couple of folks. Okay, great. So you'll be able to see how this is a little bit different. Both tours cover the basics of Hart Island and its history, but this tour specifically touches on the voices of folks who lived and worked on the island. And we try to tell a little bit of their story. And we'll also be able to see a few different more historical locations there. We're going to take our ferry over onto the island right over there. That'll be about a 10-minute ride, and then once we're on there, we will have some more porta potties if you need to use them on towards the start of the tour. Just to remind everybody, this is an active cemetery, so while we are here to enjoy and to be educated and appreciate it, I'd like us to be respectful when observing the landscape, when taking photos. We may pass some open graves, so you can take your photos of everything, but try to refrain from taking any pictures of like the open plots. Some folks on the tour today may have a personal connection to the island, so it's just important to kind of maintain an attitude of respect amongst everybody here. But I think the ferry is waiting for us to go, so does anybody have any questions before we get started? All good? Okay, great. So let's head down to the ferry.
All right guys, we are headed to the ferry over to Hart Island. And we are leaving City Island. Look who it is. How are you? How's everything going? Good, man. Doing really good.
Nice. Good deal, man. Doing another
Good to
tour.
see you again. Yeah.
Sweet, sweet.
Another tour.
I'll be right back.
All right.
Grab something. Round 2, huh?
Yep. How's it going?
How are you?
Good to see you, man.
Last time.
Oh, okay. Good to see you, man.
I watched it. The other guy that works here, he's out today. Watches your videos.
Oh, okay. That's awesome. Appreciate it.
He'll be bummed that you're here.
How's it going?
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How's everything going? Good to see you again.
Make back for the other tour now?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I did the North tour the first time and then now the South tour, yeah. Got another one. Captain up there. A little foggy and hazy today. I hope you didn't mind being a star of that original video.
No, it all worked out.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
It's so funny. People in the comments were like, "Man, that guy's awesome. You got the tour before the tour."
I gotta look. I haven't even looked at the comments.
Oh, okay.
On the video.
Yeah.
But
I don't know.
watched it, though.
Yeah. Did you see that I went over to David's Island?
Did you?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
even missed it. Yeah. I gotta check it out.
Yeah, went to David's
How
Island.
was that?
Really good. It was really cool. Obviously, a lot of the buildings are gone.
Okay. Yeah.
But there was still a lot of interesting stuff to see.
I went there as a kid once. We were like 15. We went over my buddy's boat. And we get to the island, and it was just like this time of year. Like it hasn't really fully grown, like all the shrubs and stuff. So
Yeah.
you can still get through. There were buildings still there before they took them down.
Yeah.
We get up and start making our way into inland, and we saw like a raft, like a green raft was like also like beach on the on the side. We keep walking, and there was this guy, fully decked out in camo.
Really?
Like makeup, he's just like totally silent, didn't say anything, just stared at us. And I'm like, I think I forgot something on the boat.
That's funny.
We left. We were like, scared the crap out of us. Like, this guy's nuts.
That's funny. That's funny. So yeah, it took me 3 tries to get in this tour.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a pain in the butt. You get on there and you apply, and then, sorry, you didn't get in the lottery. And so yeah, it took me 3 tries, so I'm back.
Perfect day.
Yeah, this is beautiful. It was chilly last time I was here and windy.
Yeah.
I haven't heard the numbers in a while, but a lot of people apply for these, and there's only like 30 spots.
Yeah,
They'll have like over 100 people
apply.
for a single date.
Right. Yeah, so it's not as easy and it's not as accessible. Obviously they're trying to make it more accessible, but it's only one North tour and one South tour each month. So and you guys are running the ferry like every day pretty much, or just
Pretty much. It's Tuesday.
for contractors and stuff, I would imagine?
Contract. You've been doing this for years. I mean, like, before Parks was here, it was corrections.
Right.
And, it was like every day with corrections.
Right. Are they still working on the church?
They are. That'd probably be, they're looking at, I heard September, October, and then it should be ready to open up. But then who knows what they'll do? They might decide they want to put a roof on it.
Right.
Now it's going to be open air.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they're just
That's
doing
interesting.
Pointing work so it's safe.
Yeah.
That a brick or a stone doesn't fall on anyone.
Yeah. Man, what a day today would be for kayaking, huh? I should have kayaked over here, met everyone over here. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I can see those counterweights back there. I don't know if you saw the video, but there was a fire over at not Hart Island, but North Brother Island. And I went to go see the aftermath of it, and one of the buildings completely burned out.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty crazy.
That's common. That used to happen here all the time.
Yeah.
Kids, like, little kids come over, and they outwired by the corrections buses once and go to the island.
Really?
Then, like, a number of years ago, probably like 20 years now, a bunch of kids rode over, kind of like intoxicated.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the boat capsized.
Oh,
They
wow.
all died. 5 kids.
Not
They
good.
had them all laid out on the dock. It's
Yeah.
like 20 years. It sold like 20 years ago. Watch your step, folks.
Welcome to Hart Island. We are about in the middle of the island, just to give us some orientation. Behind you over here, that's the north side of the island. And behind me is the south side. That's where we're going to be going today. The island is about 1.3 miles long and about a quarter of a mile wide. It's 130 acres or so. And we are about 13 miles from Midtown. Before I get going with any of the details, I want to ask you a question if you would mind turning to another person participating in the tour today. I'd like you to talk about how many methods of transportation you took to get to the island today and how far you came. So if you turn to somebody you don't know, hit up a quick chat just to see where we're all at.
Hello.
How's it going?
How's it going?
Hey, Graham.
Matt.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Let's see. I drove my vehicle here.
Same here.
All right, everybody. Bye, boat. So, based on all of your conversations here, does anybody here think that they came the farthest to get here today? Would you like to share?
From Southern Delaware.
Southern Delaware, okay. So anybody here take the train, maybe a car, definitely took a boat? Anybody bike at all? That's another transit, a little bit of biking, yeah.
I've
So-
kayaked around here.
Okay, yeah. So many different ways. All of that, the reason I asked that question is because I just wanted to bring attention to how far removed and isolated Hart Island is from the rest of the city here. And that's just referring to this year, 2025. But Hart Island has been around for quite a while. So we have to go back to the time before we had cars, before we had ferries like this and fast trains and whatnot. Because Hart Island was originally purchased by the city in 1868. So that's over 150 years ago. It has always been a place of isolation and a little bit of mystery as well. In fact, I'd like to ask, does anybody here know anything about Hart Island? Or do you remember when you first heard about Hart Island? Yeah.
Somebody I knew was buried here. I had a dysentery.
Okay. So you have a very personal connection here.
I didn't know her that well, but yeah.
Well, yeah.
Our synagogue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you have something?
Oh, I was gonna ask, who was the island purchased from?
Yes. Yeah.
So originally, this island was purchased by the Pell family from the Lenape natives that were inhabitants of this region. But then it transferred into different private families and used for different purposes. But it was purchased from a private family. I think the Hunter family was the last family to.
Yeah, so it transferred ownership a whole lot. It was not really purchased; it was more like acquired from the Lenape.
Yes.
And they didn't have any residents on the island here, but we know that it was used for resource gathering and whatnot. So yeah, that's how it transferred. Anybody from City Island here? Sometimes we do. So you might have gone to Orchard Beach for a while, and you might have seen the island. Personally, when I started as a ranger, we would be on the beach, and people would ask, "What's Hart?" And we were like, "I didn't really know." And in fact, it was very new to us as well, because for a long time here, it was under the jurisdiction of the Department of Corrections. Because Hart Island has a long institutional history, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit about on the tour today. It's very recent that it's been transferred to parks, about 2022. So that's as recent as we've been doing programs here. We started just over a year and a half ago. So this is a very new program, and it's very special that we're able to be here. Yeah.
What's that sound? Is that a gun sound? Like
Yes.
guns or...
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
That's Rodman's Neck. That's the NYPD's shooting range for training new recruits.
Cool.
We currently, it has been a city cemetery for 150 years, so I was telling somebody else on the way over, there are over 1 million people buried here right now. It is still an active cemetery, so that's about 1,000 people are buried each year. And I think it's important to note that we may have heard that Hart Island is a place for the unknown and the unrecognized to be buried, but the fact is actually that a lot of the folks buried here are known. They do have names. It's just that they weren't able to have family get in contact with them, or they weren't able to afford being buried anywhere else, or they chose to be buried here. And there's a lot of that too. So yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit more along the tour. And then just also to touch on the natural aspect, because this is still, there's not a lot of people here. So you see a lot of nature. We have the geese. We might run into some angry geese today because we're getting into nesting season. So watch out for that. And then also behind us, I just want to point out our osprey nest. That's our fish hawk. Yeah, not happy that we're right here. But they come back every single year, and she's probably sitting on some eggs right now. So we have an osprey nest there. Some of you saw it at the start on the ferry, and we also have an osprey nest all the way over there. We have so many on this island. They love it here. So hopefully we'll be able to be graced by them a little bit too, because I think they're really cute and very fun.
What's being grown over here?
Oh, that's just ongoing gardening that they've been doing to kind of beautify the island a little bit, because they've been doing a lot of that work too. If anybody has any other questions, we can get going, because our next stop is going to be talking about the structures that we see behind us here. Okay. So, oh, and we're going to head over to the porta potties too. So this is your last chance.
Looking through your paces, and you're doing really well.
Yeah. So you see this
So this one used to be, if everyone wants to share kind of what they noticed or what they were thinking about while looking around. Anybody? Or a lack of seeing things? Because it is pretty scarce on this island. Yes, a lot of the buildings that were once here weren't like viable anymore to keep up. The only building that was in good enough condition to keep was the chapel behind us, which was a interfaith chapel. I'm pretty sure it was founded by the Christian charities or Catholic charities. Construction began in the 1930s, but operations stopped at the chapel in the 1960s. That was when the last workhouse, which we'll get into a little bit. But you might see a little of the structures that were once here on the island, like the rock wall behind us, the chapel, and it kind of represents that this island, up until 1991, was not just used as the city's public cemetery. It was used for different other institutions were housed here. They have facilities here, and different communities called this place home, or they worked here, like workhouses. Medical institutions were once here. Prisons, military institutions were here. Schools, reformatories, and also rehabilitation centers were once here. They all used the same and shared this space, and they kind of the communities ingrained themselves in the history of Hart Island and had a connection with the land. Even in this place of seems isolation, communities were able to come together and kind of build a stronger community with each other, even in this place of isolation. Yes?
A couple questions, because we can't see a lot of the architecture, but these lane marker trees, do you guys know roughly when all of this was planted? Because they look like they're planted about the same time.
Yeah, so this was these are called London plane trees, which are the trees on our badges. So I'm pretty sure they were put in 1930s.
Yeah, so if any of you know Robert Moses, he was a really big fan of these trees, and I think they planted them all over the city around the same time.
They would have been short saplings in the 1930s?
Yeah.
And then also during the time when these were residences or hospitals or whatever the work communities, was this ferry port, was that basically the main, like,
yes,
that people it would be from that island to this island was the main conduit for people who didn't live here but had to get out here daily
exactly.
or weekly.
And it is kind of interesting when you think about it more of all these institutions that were once here. It's kind of represents kind of how New York City, how their needs changed over time. So this island was basically used for whatever the city needed at that current time. So exactly, yes. So it's kind of just like the changing opinions of the island. But yeah, if we don't have any questions, we'll move on to our next section.
But yeah, I'm gonna stand over here so you're not staring into the sun for our next stop, because I want to talk about how we got to Hart Island and why are we here in the first place. Because New York City isn't all that old. I mean, it was just incorporated as a city with the Bronx in the early 1900s. But we mentioned Hart Island, the city's owned it since 1868. So how did we get here in the first place? Well, to do that, we have to go back to the start of New York City as a whole. What I have here on my tablet is a map of New York City, 1797.
Here, I'll go around too.
Yeah, so this is 1797. This is where the population of New York was located. Very small. You can see it on the southern tip of Manhattan. Oh, yeah, thank you. I'm going to go around that. So on the tip of Manhattan, you've got the population there. A population about 50,000. The next time you're going to look is 1849. So that's moved over about 60 years or so. population has now grown from 50,000 to 500,000, so it's tenfold, about exponential.
The Irish.
Because of the Irish, yeah. So there's a lot of immigration into the city. Yeah, a lot of different folks are moving into the city from all over the place, and then that changes over time too, because the next stop we're getting to is 1919, and our population has grown from 500,000 again to 5 million. And you can see the population, it's spread out a little bit to the other boroughs. Manhattan's grown a lot, but it still isn't the whole of New York City we are today. Our population today is about 8 million. So that's honestly not that much more than 1919, which is over 100 years ago, which is pretty crazy. Just imagine how dense it was back then. You had the tenement houses, so a lot of families living in very small places, and combined with all of that, that created a lot of disease, that created a lot of unsanitary conditions, and with so many people, you also had to find somewhere to bury all of these people. So as New York City grew, they had to do that. So can anybody here think about Southern Manhattan? What parks can you think of that exist in Southern Manhattan?
Washington Square.
Mm-hmm. Washington Square Park? Do you say Battery?
Yeah.
There's also
Battery's
Washington
Yeah.
Market Square.
Madison Square.
Madison Square?
Bryant Park.
Bryant Park? Union
Battery
Square?
Park.
Yeah,
Tompkins
Battery
Square.
Park is new. Excuse me?
Tompkins.
Tompkins Square Park? Yeah. So most of these parks, all of these parks that usually have square in their name, those were originally public cemeteries. Some of you may have gone there and seen like
What in the name?
excuse me?
What did you say in the name?
A public cemetery.
Square.
Yeah, a square. Yeah. And a public cemetery means that it's a place where people were buried who, like here, might have not been identified or known, or couldn't afford anywhere else, or they couldn't have their family be reached. They were the city put them somewhere collectively. And that goes all the way back to the city's start. As the city grew, eventually, the city council was like, no more burials on Manhattan. This is too much, too dense. And then they moved over to Randall's and Ward's Island.
When was that? When did they decide no more burials in Manhattan?
Oh,
So
yeah.
that happened in the mid 1800s. So
Like the
1840s,
40s and
40s and
50s,
50s, and then all the way up to the 60s. Because, as you saw, it was kind of just concentrated early on to Manhattan, like the tip of Manhattan, where they kept kind of moving the line, where it's like they were like, we're gonna make our cemeteries in the rural areas, but then as it grew,
Yeah, like north of the 80s.
they were
Mhm.
running out of areas to put in.
Yeah, but we haven't gotten to the Civil War yet.
Mhm.
We're still just thinking about New York City and moving around and everything. It wasn't until the 68 that they bought Hart Island from the private landowners, because New York City, I think they just anticipated that they would keep on growing, and they reached all the way out here, 13 miles from Midtown. The Bronx wasn't even part of the city yet, and they got this place. And that's when, like Nick mentioned, anything that they needed in addition to the burials, they put here as well. But then, of course, you do have the Civil War. And we talk a little bit more about that on our North Tour, but just to give you some context, when the Civil War happened in the 1860s, America had to grapple with death in an unprecedented level. And they had to figure out, how do we bury so many people at the same time? And that's kind of when they came up with this burial system that's highly organized that they use on Hart Island today. So if you look at every single plot around here, each one is about 150 individuals, buried in a neat stack and row, where you can locate every single person that is buried there for potential disinterments, which is if a family finds their loved one and they'd like them to be removed and buried somewhere else privately, that's what they can do here.
How many bodies are stacked?
So it's stacked about 3 deep
3 deep, yes.
and 25 long. Yeah.
How often does that happen?
They
Disinterments?
Or
Yeah.
Oh no, a disinterment?
No.
Oh, they're like, yeah.
Were you
That's a
asking
good
about
question.
disinterments or the
Yeah.
burials?
Yeah, I guess both.
They're
are
both
fine,
good
but
questions.
mostly I'm curious, like how often people actually go in and retrieve their family.
So I know during the COVID pandemic, there were a lot of disinterments that happened when kind of we were allowed to kind of come back from our own isolations that we were dealing with at the time. So, and then when they were able to reach the next of kin, that were able to then travel to kind of claim their loved ones, then a lot of disinterments were happening around that time.
Yeah. They still do several a year or so, but yeah.
I bet you have to pay a lot for that.
The city provides the disinterment fee. Yeah, they cover all of that. It's just you arrange the private burial.
So right over here is our prison wall. It's kind of hard to see from this angle, so but I do have a picture of what it looks like kind of looking at it directly. So it's pretty basically, it was a sign, prison, keep off. But we talked a little about the institutions that were once housed here and that operated on the island.
Oh, cool.
So prisons was one of the institutions. It just worked out because this island was operated by the Department of Corrections, so they would have some of those kind of connections. Inmate labor was actually used on the island, so inmates were the ones working and kind of doing the burials on this island from pretty much by the time this became New York City's public cemetery, so that was 1869, all the way up to 2020. So inmate labor was utilized in that sense. There were facilities that were on the island that housed inmates. That wasn't a continuous thing though. It, like we said earlier, it depended on what was going on in the greater New York City. So if there was an overcrowding in the correction department, they would bring inmates over here to be housed. Here's a picture of some of the inmate labor that was done on this island. So a little about the inmate labor. It was voluntary, as voluntary as you could kind of think for prisoners, but some of the aspects of it, it was one of the more well-paying jobs that an inmate can have. Again, but that comes with its kind of demands that it took to do a work like this. It's definitely took its toll mentally on the inmates that were here, but also in the other side, it also gave the inmates a sense of community with each other. While we're just talking about inmate labor, does anyone have a sense of why inmates would want to do this kind of work?
Well, you just said they get paid.
They get paid, but there's other paying jobs that they could have done just either on Rikers,
to get outside.
To get outside, definitely. Exercise. Again, this place is isolated, so some people feel a sense of peace and serenity in kind of isolation. So some inmates did have a sense of community with each other. And then also with the island itself, they became very attached to the island. They had a greater respect for the people that were buried here. Here is a video of someone who is actually part of working here as an inmate. His name is Kaz Torres.
You hear his story here. He was arrested for marijuana possession. I think it's all good.
Yep.
Alcoholic, and she couldn't take care of us. So I pretty much grew up in different types of juvenile institutions. And the day after her death, I was arrested for selling pot. I was released because the cops found the funeral card in my pocket. Sure, I was a kid, but that doesn't mean I necessarily had a childhood. And when I was in my late teens, I was arrested for robbery. They moved me to Hart Island, the city burial ground, where people who were too poor to afford burial or just unclaimed bodies, they're buried there. I initially was on the cemetery crew, and I would bury the bodies. I don't think I was ever at the breaking point, but I can tell you this much. One thing that took a little bit more effort to really deal with was the babies. It's not something you should be seeing. I think back on it, and I just can't understand it. I don't see how this can happen, but at the same time, I do understand. I do understand there's things happening in this world that a lot of the public are not aware of. The people who are unclaimed, I think they would want somebody to remember them. As simple as that. I think they would want somebody to come and see them. I think they would want somebody to care where they're at, and I think they would want somebody to mourn them. At least one person in this world you want to love you. And I think everybody wants that.
Here is a news article of actually one person, similar to, he was an inmate here. He was working as, so basically the burial detail. And basically he was doing his work. He was working to dig up one of the plots, and then he goes to a fellow prisoner and says, "This one is mine." And then later that day, he did commit suicide by jumping off from the prison facilities, so from the third story. This kind of isolation did have a negative impact on some people. But that's something to always look at when you're kind of dealing with these stories and these histories, that we're all different. Some people can find community and find solace in that. Others react differently. So that's something to always keep in mind. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
When did we stop using prison labor for this task? And then
so we stopped in 2020. We stopped. So
Prison labor up to 2020.
when did we stop doing it? Who does the labor now?
And right now, it's an outside company that does it. I think it's JPL does all the aerial maintenance.
So what are they doing now? They're just preparing new.
Yes, it looks like they are preparing new plots. Yeah.
Do we know what the sentiment among the prison population now is to not be able to come out here anymore?
Good question.
That is a good question. We don't have.
Well, we imagine that they would have liked. We know that it was a preferable choice to come out here because you get to work outside, and this job is somewhat meaningful compared to other stuff they might be doing. But as far as
Excuse me. So why they stop that?
Oh, that's because so there had been a push for a while from various private individuals and city council members to transfer jurisdiction of Hart Island to parks to make it open to the public. And as part of that process, they felt that it wasn't safe to have prison inmates from of any variety working alongside members of the public visiting the island. So that was their sentiment for that. It is kind of, some may say it's unfortunate that they were taken away this opportunity to work on the island.
So So when inmates were not housed on the island, they would be transported from Rikers, and mainly the workers that were working on this detail were lower class of crimes. So they were mainly people who committed misdemeanors.
Was it straight ferry to ferry?
Yes.
How convenient.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Did they have tours when the prisoners were running the island, or just started when Parks did?
No, what Ranger Hunter said earlier, that tours are a very new thing. We've only been doing this for a year and a half.
Oh.
So yeah.
Think about yourself. If you've ever wanted to be alone, or if you've ever gone somewhere to have some space, where was that, and why would you go there? And also, Hart Island does still boast a beautiful landscape, beautiful ecology. We have our osprey flying away over there again. Get a lot of different geese. We have our Brant geese over there visiting from the north. They're just about to leave. So we have a whole lot of nature going on here too. So Hart Island still has a lot of beauty as well.
Okay, so to talk a little about the communities here, and the inmate labor is kind of involuntary, being on this island, having this sense of isolation, being on the islands. But does anyone see the perks of voluntarily choosing to be on this island and kind of experiencing isolation in a sense? But yeah, kind of just like the peacefulness, the serenity, getting away from the city. It does have some positives to it.
And like it would be an ecologically good choice too.
Yes.
To be very communally and with like a less packaging. Stuff.
Yes, exactly. And so one of the communities that was housed here is a rehabilitation center, which was called the Phoenix House. So
has anybody heard of the Phoenix House?
Yeah, it was here.
It started here.
Drug rehabilitation.
Yes, drug rehabilitation.
They're now
exactly.
over in Astoria.
Oh, they are? Okay, perfect. Okay, so they're still in the city. They expanded to other states around the country. But yeah, so basically it was started in the city by 5 people who were struggling with substance abuse. And they actually met in a detox center. So and then they pretty much came together and created this program to help others who were struggling with substance abuse. And they had a facility out here on Hart Island, which ran for 70 years, around the 1960s.
Into the 70s, yeah.
Into the 70s. And then sadly they had to relocate from this island due to financial reasons.
Financial crisis, fiscal crisis.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, while they were on the island, they kind of benefited from this isolation. There were no alcohol, no drugs allowed. Basically, and then they kind of built a community together. They were self-sufficient program, so they had their own garden. They fended for themselves, and they kind of lived life away from what they came to know from the city. Kind of get away from that, and then come here and kind of a better chance to deal with the struggles and that they were going through with substance abuse. Phoenix House is also kind of a standard for substance abuse rehabilitation, even to this day. Also, Phoenix House was a chance to invite people onto the island as well. So the residents lived here full time, or however long they were a part of the program, but then also they would have events here. These were called the happenings, so they were annual fundraisers where they invited, they were run by the residents of Phoenix House, and they were basically festivals with live music to support their goal of kind of sobriety in that sense, where these festivals were sober. No alcohol was brought, no drugs were brought onto the island. I'm pretty sure we have a.
Let me pull that up for you.
Yeah.
Did people on City Island ever complain about that?
No, because it was just actually there might have been instances where there were complaints.
Yeah. But I think they were more okay with it, given that it was such a strict, like, they had such a strict policy of like sobriety.
It was, yes, it was once a year. I know, because sometimes the events gathered thousands of people onto the island.
They protested other things on Hart before. We'll talk about that at our next stop. But
is it on?
Yeah, it's all good.
So this is a recording of a person named Gene Scott, who was originally a part of Phoenix House as a patient, but then afterwards she went on to become an ambassador of Phoenix House and went on to be a director of it.
I wind up running the
It glitches. It's okay.
entire island. And I don't know, I was down in induction, giving a seminar one time, talking to the new people about staying and changing your life and all this other stuff. And there was a guy there from Ireland, and there was a guy there from Alabama. The guy from Ireland talked about planting potatoes, and Ralph Duck talked about this farming period. So I said to them, fine, maybe we should have a farm. Well, we sent away for the seeds, for the stuff, and they gave me $200 to buy some starter potatoes. Well, we didn't have no machinery, we had shovels. And Hart Island used to be a prison for people that didn't pay child support or people who got arrested for running numbers. Short stay kind of stuff. And they had buried all of the big rocks under the ground. So as we're digging, we're coming up with all these rocks. Fagan taught me how to plant potatoes. There's a whole art. You have to put them in before St. Patty's Day. It's a whole ritual with this guy. He was a drunk, nice guy. So you dig the hole, you put a little dirt on this side, and you have to do the potatoes 1 foot apart. So you put your foot in the hole and you put a potato, then you put the starter potato. Well, I wound up with 2 tons of potatoes and 3,500 pounds of tomatoes and cabbage, big cabbage. So we were able to feed all of the houses for the entire summer. Kevin worked in public information, so he was able to get the news crews to come and take pictures of the farm and all of that.
Yeah, so
gorgeous New York accent.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, so that was just kind of an example of just how a positive this island was in its isolation, being able to kind of detach from everyday life and to be out here, and the positives that come with that. Here are some pictures of what a happening would have looked like. So everyone there just enjoying the festivities.
There's a lot of people.
You can see
Yeah.
where they set up. It was towards the entrance where we got off the ferry. So you get off the island and go straight into the tent. They did not allow anybody to go anywhere else. Just to build off of some of the questions that I've heard, the actual structure that Phoenix House was in was right here. It actually is kind of outlined by the trees again. So pretty much wherever there's not a tree and not a plot, that's where the Phoenix House originally was.
Like beyond these 3 guys here?
Yeah, like between them there was a building, and then past them there was also another building.
Wow.
The trees really grew up like in the middle of everything during those years. But yeah, and you could see they had like a gigantic phoenix painted that you could see. I don't know if you saw it when you kayaked around here before.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you could see it from the side of the water. It's pretty cool.
Did anybody ever leave the island via the water?
Like escape?
Swim.
Yeah.
Yes.
Some people
I'm pretty sure there are some.
It's not like Alcatraz.
Alcatraz.
Yeah, it's like a lot more peaceful here.
Nobody by wings.
So
yeah, there are some records of instances coming out like that. I don't think it happened too often.
Yeah.
But it was something that happened.
There is an island, you can't see it from here, or you can kind of see it from here over there. There's an island between here and City Island called Rat Island.
Oh, yeah.
And the historical reasoning for that name is because that's where the people who would escape from the prison, supposedly, would swim, go to that island to take a break, and that's where they were ratted out, because that's where you would find them. We haven't found any like actual evidence for that actually happening, but you know.
That's the rumor.
Yeah.
How could it not be true?
Yeah.
So just for some context, while Phoenix House was here, they were still doing the shared burials. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Was Phoenix House at all involved in the labor of the shared burials?
No.
Okay, and then lastly, since there was like a dynamo over there, did Phoenix House have electricity or plumbing or water pressure or anything here, or was it well water?
Pretty
What was
sure,
happening?
yeah, at that time.
Yeah, there was
like utilities.
Yeah.
There were
around the
basic
island.
utilities, and what about telephone? Because it wasn't cell phone based. Like,
No.
I'm not sure if that was part of the program to have outside contact.
So like it truly was
Yeah.
isolated.
Detached,
Once you left the ferry port, you were
Yes.
it was you and your community here.
So have you all been to Coney Island before?
Yeah.
Have you been to Six Flags?
Where?
Six Flags?
Any of them? Six Flags?
Six Flags? No. Have you
Right,
been to
Playland.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, Playland? Okay, fair enough. Have you been to Solomon Reilly's amusement park?
I've heard of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was in this area. So in 1924, the southern 4 acres were sold to Solomon Reilly for $35,000 after New York City declined to purchase it from John Hunter. So his plan was to create a Coney Island type space, but for people of color, because they weren't allowed on Coney Island.
Really?
Yeah. So he was an immigrant from Barbados, and he built up the name Millionaire Reilly because he would buy up different property around Harlem and he would rent it out to people of color. He built up around $2 million in Harlem realty, which you can imagine how much that would be today. So it's June 1925, right? Everything is just about completed, right? We've got a dance hall, a 200-foot boardwalk, and then New York City pulls the plug. And they have to knock everything down, and there's a big legal fight, and eventually he's paid out $144,000, which probably doesn't even come close to the amount of money that he put back into it. And it would have been, like we've talked to experts on Solomon Reilly, and there are no pictures of him, and there's no pictures of like the beautiful thing that he had built. Which is a shame, but there's an alternate timeline in which it exists and it's glorious. But yeah, it was right here.
What we do know is that he built a waste treatment plant, and they did use that for a little bit. So I think Department of Corrections said thank you for the infrastructure. And
Yeah, we'll take that part.
Yeah.
So wait, why did the city shut it down? Just because fishes and giggles? Or?
So the claim was that they were worried that prisoners would use it as a way to escape. That there would be more ferries coming in, and there would be big crowds, and that would be a way for them to escape. There's obviously underlying.
I mean, the depression probably would have gotten them later.
But they would have had fun for a while beforehand.
10 years. 7 years.
Yeah. So, but obviously, there's a lot of underlying racism, which is why things were shut down. Absolutely.
Do we want to read the newspaper article?
Sure. Yeah. I wasn't sure if we had.
Oh, sure. I can read it real quick.
Go ahead.
So there's the New York Amsterdam News in 1925 published an article about Solomon Reilly, and we'll just read it here. Reilly's Hart Island project turned down. The endeavor of Solomon Reilly, a real estate dealer, to develop a summer pleasure resort on Hart's Island will terminate as a result of the action of the Board of Aldermen. By unanimous vote, the comptroller was instructed to acquire the 4-acre tract which he purchased last year. This action followed a report by the Finance Committee stating that it's desirable for the city to acquire the property, which is close to the juvenile reformatory and separated only by a hedged fence. They believed that the escapees would be facilitated by the line of 60 motorboats, which were to carry pleasure seekers to and from the island. So. Yeah. Yeah. But that's just a highlight on one of the potential uses of Hart. But we're going to move forward a little bit in time. So this is the 1920s. On our next stop, which is just right over here, I want us to think more about a different kind of epidemic that happened in the 1980s. This is the southernmost point on the island, and it can also kind of be known as one of the most isolated parts of the island. Now, when I asked about what's going on in the 1980s, what do you think? exactly. Yeah, the AIDS epidemic. So it was a moment of political upheaval, and it was also the moment of the AIDS crisis. And if any of you are familiar with that, it did go on for about maybe 14 years or so before proper treatment was developed, and went on for about 10 years before it was even acknowledged. So for a lot of that time, there were a lot of people who were contracting it and then dying from the symptoms who were not even recognized as having died from AIDS. And a lot of those folks ended up on Hart Island because it happened to be most affecting the most vulnerable populations, the most poor populations, the intravenous drug users of the drug crisis that was also happening at the time. And that's what Phoenix House came about for. And the city had some feelings about that. So if you look behind us over here, you can see that line of markers. Did anybody get a closer look at them at all when we were walking by?
They had dates on them.
They had dates on them, yeah.
And rocks.
And rocks?
Well, when people, pay their respects and remembrance.
Memorial rocks? Yeah.
And they have a different bottom than the other ones. They're not wood stakes.
It's like concrete?
Yeah.
Yeah. So these markers have dates on them. You'll see 1986, 1984, stuff like that. Each one of those markers marks a plot where somebody was buried who died from AIDS complications. It's interesting though. This is kind of a mystery to us, and we're still doing research because I mentioned that every single plot in the distance there has about 150 individuals buried. Each one of these is just one person buried. There are somewhere around 30 plots buried here. And each one of those, we were able to hear from the folks responsible for conducting these burials. They said that they buried them as deep as the backhoe could bury, which was 14 feet. Your typical plot over there is about 4 feet deep. And they even they put on these Tyvek suits, and they conducted the burials in these Tyvek suits, and then they threw their clothes out afterwards. So between burying them individually, burying them 14 feet deep, throwing your clothes out, what do you think they were feeling when they were conducting these burials?
Fear.
Shock and fear, yeah?
Probably a lot like the beginning of COVID, and we just didn't know when we're wiping down our groceries and bringing overly precautions. Crazy.
Yeah, exactly. So you didn't really know what was going on, especially with COVID. We didn't know, was it transmitted through the air? Does it stay in the groceries? I remember washing my groceries. Now back then, of course, it took a while for the news to circulate broadly that it was specifically transmitted not through touch, not through that. So that was known at the time, but of course, the administration was still fearful. In fact, the funeral administrators of New York said that you have the right to turn away anybody who died from AIDS complications. And so a lot of folks who got turned away ended up having to go to Hart Island. And so the first 30 or so were buried like that. Eventually, that was overruled, and folks could be buried with everybody else. So as a result, so many people died in New York City and then went to Hart Island. We can most confidently say that this may be one of the largest burial grounds for victims of the AIDS epidemic, and that's what we have here.
That's just a memorial of fear.
Yeah, that's how. Yeah, that's one thing. That's a way we could describe it. And then, if we have the time, I think so. I'd like us to visit this one last plot that we see down here.
We'll walk fast.
Because this is also an important spot. When we first visited, started touring the island in 2022. Yeah, because their population was so down. And we have. So if everybody would like to take a look and see what might be written on here. I know the rocks are blocking it a little bit.
Was this a number?
Yeah, so there are some letters and some numbers. Does anybody know what it might say?
1985.
Mm-hmm. And then the top is SCB1. Yeah, so the SC, that stands for special case, and B stands for baby. That's how they marked their plots where the infants are buried here. So this, also 1985. When the inmates here were conducting their burials, they must have received an infant who had been indicated that they died from AIDS complications. And so I can imagine that they must have felt something. And so they buried this here at the southernmost part of the island so that it can stand out and so that it can represent something.
85 too, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How often are people who have loved ones buried here, are they allowed to visit these days? Like how often does it open?
They do visitations twice a month.
So when it was in the jurisdiction of corrections, that was twice a year. That
Oh, wow. That's
they
all?
allowed access to the
Yeah.
island. So a part of the island being under the jurisdiction of parks is to open up access and kind of allow people the chance to come on the islands more frequently.
I'm gonna give us a moment. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna head back to the end of the AIDS burials over there. If you'd like to have a moment and pay your respects, or just take any remembrances, we can do that here and then along the other burials as well. But you can all just meet me over there. Okay, I'm gonna bring us going back to the start where we were. Keep us moving. Some of you may have seen this picture going around back then. It's a drone footage that somebody captured, not official parks footage, of some of the burials being conducted. And you can see that the inmates, because this was still inmate labor, were wearing the Tyvek suits again. So I think they might have once again been feeling that fear of, how do you contract it? I'm going to cover every inch of my body. And so yeah, that's kind of what this area is. And this is also the site of a lot of disinterments as well then, because a lot of families were finding their loved ones here. Is still referred to it. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
This is kind of the last stop in the tour. And then here what we have is a global pandemic touchstone. This is made through the International Stonewalk Society. They've done a whole lot of other stones and projects, but this is the most recent one they've done. And the story, we actually just learned about the story because the last program I did, one of the gentlemen who organized this attended. So he said that this stone and this cart were carried or pulled by families of individuals who died from COVID. They pulled it all the way through the length of Central Park. And then from there, they delivered it onto Hart Island here. And the idea is that it buries the weight of everybody who has died from a pandemic, because you think about the memorials that we see for certain things, you don't always see memorials for pandemics. So where's the memorial for the Spanish flu? How many memorials do we have for AIDS, and do they represent the true crisis that it was? Do we have any memorials for COVID in a way? So that's what this represents. And the intent is that this touchstone stays laying down so that you're able to, well, the idea is that if you had some water, you could wet your hand and then put it on the stone and then watch as your handprint fades away. So if anybody has any water bottles, you're welcome to do that. Yeah, so we don't really know where this is going to go yet. It might go up to the chapel when it's finished, but for now, this is where it is. And then if anybody would like to take a seat under the gazebo as we wait for the ferry.
All right, guys, I want to thank you for watching 2 Feet Outdoors YouTube channel. I hope you enjoyed this video. I certainly did, and we'll see you guys on the next one.